Hello, people. I'm gonna hope this all goes well. I got a new microphone. Look at it. I think you can see that. I think that comes up. It's out of the way, so I don't, you know, smash it with all my gesticulating, as it were. Okay. Today, today it's going to be the story of the glittering plane by William Morris. It's winter-ish, right? And always when it gets cold, you start thinking of Lord of the Rings. At least I do. And I think of it when it's cold, and then sometimes when it's hot, and then a lot of times in between. In any case, Lord of the Rings is why I know this author exists. He's supposed to be the guy that helped inspire our boy Tolkien. So of course, once I heard that, I'm like, I gotta read this. And this is one of the stories I found. I believe this is free. This is free on Kindle, so it's probably free other places. It's one of these public domain situations. So you can almost not beat that value. I know there's some free books I wouldn't read, but don't let this be one of them. So my rating is going to be, I think, a 4 out of 5. It's a little bit short, so it won't interfere too much in whatever else you're reading. You can take a break and enjoy this. It's nice, healthy language, good verbiage to munch on, so to speak. But I don't know that enough happens to make a casual enjoy it. I mean, they don't like to read, so you got to really entertain them. So I wouldn't recommend this to a casual. But the rest of us readers can enjoy it. And I'm going to put this in the Tolkien playlist. I'm going to put all his books there because to me they all sort of tie in, and I'll sort of go over it as I go. Now, when I make the connections to Tolkien, now know that this is just me sort of seeing there, not anything the author did, either of them. I don't think William Morris was alive when Tolkien started writing. And I'm for sure Tolkien never said, I connected this to that. So don't get, don't freak out about that. But I think, and I read a lot of it, I think almost everything he wrote. At least the fantastical stuff. He does some that are pure mythology, Greek mythology. But some of it's sort of fantastical. Some of the Norse stuff really feels like it fits, like it could, like they could connect in a way. Some of the verbiage, some of the character names are the same even, and some of the style of writing, the temperaments, some events that happen, right? Circulus, kind of. And I only mention these because I think Tolkien's good enough of a writer to sort of take these ideas and give a through line there if you can see it, which I think I can see it. But even without this sort of, what do we say, head canon that I'm making up, it's still a fun, enjoyable little book, and it's not that long, so you can really get into it. It starts. It has been told that there was once a young man of free kindred, and whose name was Hallblythe. He was fair, strong, and not untrained in battle. He was of the house of the Raven of old time. Now, Mike, this is the part where a man of free kindred. This is what perspective. I always think of this, I always mention this when I look at these stories and think about them. From let's say a large kingdom. Everyone outside that kingdom, everyone who wasn't Roman, everyone who's not Russian, they see outside of them as barbarians. All the Mongols are just barbarians. all the Gauls, anyone who's not Roman is a barbarian. Well, if you flip that, right, if you reverse it and you sit where they are, the barbarians, they obviously think the same thing. So they look out and say, these Romans are horrible. These city folk are terrible. Or whoever's over on that other side of the ocean is some kind of barbarian, these weird sea kings. They always make up these kind of terminology, right? So it's the same people staring at each other, but each giving each other the sort of same definition. So when you come to a book, how can an author describe to you those people and not denigrate them, right? I see this a lot in stories, and they want to be realistic about it, right? So you'll make some dirty England and everyone's greasy and dirty looking. And I'm like, it's probably accurate if you live in our century and where we take baths every day. It's probably accurate. It is accurate. But it's inaccurate to the story because they were used to being greasy, right? So to them, it'd be like you going to work. All your coworkers don't seem extraordinarily greasy. They're just normal. Maybe in 1,000 years when we have some kind of weird powder that keeps you completely sanitary, they'll look back at our century and say, look at these greasy people, driving combustion engines, this kind of situation, you see? But when you don't add that element, the element of their perspective to the story, you start to lose me. He, of course, doesn't lose me because he's a great writer. So adding these verbiages, not untrained in battle, a man of the free kindred, right? And he capitalizes kindred. He's elevating this person. He is not part of a kingdom. But neither is he just a random barbarian who makes a shed in the woods, right? This is a house he lives in. These are fields he plows. All these things just start to line up in your head just by the elevated nature of the verbiage he picks to use, right? Instant. It's a short book, but every word is useful. So he lives there, and he has, what did they say? He loved an exceedingly fair damsel called Hostage of the House of the Rose. She loved him no less. No one gainsaid their love. And they're to be wedded in midsummer night. And again, I had the Tolkien stuff in my head as I was reading it the first time and subsequently. But even without that, I get this, you get an elevated sense of this person. If he loves a pretty woman and she loves him, and no one in town has a problem with it, you've put to peace as much around you as you can. There's so many love stories where someone has an issue. I loved her, all these sort of issues. Well, normal people just brush those issues aside. I don't care what you think. I'll do what I want to do, right? But, so okay, if everyone's doing this, what is the person who takes the time to make sure no one has an issue with their issues, right? You're putting more effort in. You're a higher tiered person, right? Not better, not in those sense. Don't get out of hand with it. But this is what we start to do with politicians, with kings, with royalty. You start to look up and judge them harsher, right? People have extramarital affairs all the time, but the moment a politician does it, it's mudslinging and it's, well, he lost my vote. I can't vote for a man who's blah, blah, blah. You see? We put people on these pedestals who we want to rule over us. And then when he says midsummer's night, I just get mysterious vibes from it. So you add those mysterious vibes to this elevated verbiage, and now we have some weight, right? It's carrying this momentum. He's sitting on his porch, making a spear. And he hears galloping, and he thinks first. It's just the kids coming back from the field, playing around. Then he looks up, he sees it's not the kids, it's some maidens, because they're clothes. He's like, they're just here to talk to me about my lady. What did they call her? Did they give her name? The hostage? I love the names he uses sometimes. It's a short story. When you call someone the hostage, I think later someone is called grandfather, Hall Blythe. Basic, if your name would be Shoe, or Cowcatcher. These sort of these primitive-ish names, it throws your mind back. So you already think swords and spears and way back. I don't think car, spaceships. I don't think guns. Right? So it's just the name is setting the setting. Who would call a lady hostage? Well, if it's before hostage taking, it's not a problem. It's just a sounding name. But after, and then you start to go, well, some of this story may have something to do with that. It's feeding itself in this way. So he calls her hostage. I'm ahead of myself. He's sitting there making a spear. 3 old men ride up to him, all in a sort of a tizzy. They each ask sort of consecutive questions in a different kind of way. Each of them are different men. But they all want to know essentially, is this the glittering plain? Is this the land of living men? What is it? We seek the land where the days are many, so many that he who hath forgotten how to laugh may learn the craft again and forget the days of sorrow. It's just such great language. He says, this is a beautiful land. I don't know anything about calling it the glittering plain. He calls it, because it's between the mountains and the sea, he calls it Cleveland by the sea. And at first I'm like, my mental of Cleveland is sort of from football, the Browns. So it's not like a highly regarded place in my mind. So that part was a little funny. But, as I sink into the book, there's a part in Lord of the Rings where the land gets tore up. Right? We actually have Elvish Valar land here and then in the Middle Earth here. For whatever reason, in the middle of this, I started thinking, instead of Cleveland, Cleveland. Right? Now again, you're saying you're stretching it, you're looking for it. And it's not just because I am stretching a little bit. But other stuff comes up, and it's other stuff in other books he writes as well. But it's not just the sort of the thing itself, not just the idea. It's how he says it in some of these parts. That it'd be like if you rung a bell, and then you rung another bell further away. You're like, they both sound like bells. That's how it feels to me when I read his works, and then I read Tolkien's works. So keep that in mind. I'm going to go off on tangents. So this is sort of, and again, it's richer language than the actions, right? It doesn't much matter that 3 guys just rode up to your house. That's not a big deal. But when you say betwixt and all these higher, let's say elevated language, it starts to feel like it's more than what you're saying as a reader. Now later, if you fail and nothing comes of it, then I go, you just wasted my time. But he, of course, doesn't fail later. He feeds. It's wonderful. Then we come to the part where I was talking about the maidens. The maidens come up to him. They just encircle him, basically. They have heavy looking on their face, right? Like something serious happened. And he knows something serious has happened because he doesn't see his lady, the hostage. But they don't say anything, and he waits. again, there's a regalness about him in the actions and the way he deals with things that it starts to be like, what is it? What did I say? You know how some people, you can be titled a king. You're given that you're born a king, you are a king, but you don't act like a king. You act like a chicken. And then there are some people who you're like, he should be king. He acts like it. There's never a day where he's not, or a queen, where you're not, your head's not up. You're regal. You carry yourself in a kind of a way. You don't look down on people. You do the right thing, etc. All the standards we have for kings, right? And then you can think of this in story terms. If you read some of the King Arthur tales, he acts very much like a king, just as a 15-year-old servant, right? We love to do this, where these characteristics are innate to their being, right? So we get that from, he just stands there. He already knows it's bad news. They don't want to break the bad news to him, but then he says, tell me what it is. It doesn't matter how bad it is. We'll move on, even if it's the worst thing ever. Then they tell him. They went out by the ocean to get, they said wreck. I'm assuming to gather lumber or something, playing around. I think that's what they were doing. They see a boat, they think it's one of theirs. Dudes come on shore and it's not their dudes, so they try and leave, but they get captured. So now these are swarthy seamen, sea peoples, who captured a bunch of maidens. They're all thinking what everyone thinks. This could be horrible. I could be, rape mode activated. And it seems all horrible to them, which it is. And they ask specifically for the hostage. They're looking for her. Which one of them's her? None of them want to say. Again, heroism. You could just say it's her. No one would really blame you. But it would degrade the kind of people I think they are. None of them say anything. And then they're like, well, we're just going to take you all. Hostage, speaks up. It's me. Leave them. She really, they go, how can I know you're not lying? She says, I'm not lying because I said it. I'm like, okay. Which is what they say. Again, heroism in small actions. It doesn't take, you don't have to jump on a grenade or stop a nuke. It can be day-to-day actions, but if you describe it in a way, you can elevate simple actions to be more. That's what he does throughout the whole book. So he doesn't say anything. He just finishes making his spear. His sister brings a sword, a helmet, a hauberk. I don't know how you say this. The armor they wear, the chainmail, I believe. And the maidens bring his war horse. He didn't say anything. They don't say anything. They don't ask. He didn't have to ask. But this part, and it happens later on too. Well, no, I'll wait till later. I'll wait till later for that part. He doesn't say anything. We then cut to every young man in town. The men are riding around, searching all up and down the coast in their boats. So they don't see any sign of the hostage. They don't see any sign of him, except for his war horse, and they're all sad. It seems subtle. I mean, it doesn't seem like much, but he, with just one chapter, throws off our chronology. We were following one character step by step. Now we switched it off and something's happened. Something's happened out of our view. Just that little flip offsets, our us readers. It's a nice little concept he does. We then cut back to him. He meets a guy. A guy's just sitting out on a boat, a big guy. And he's, pointedly asking him, what do you know about this? Are you the ones who kidnapped my lady? Dude says, yeah, it's me. And he's like, instantly, come off the boat and we'll fight. And the guy's like, no. The conversations are so great. He's like, look, if you kill me, which you could do, and you might not. If I kill you, that doesn't help my cause or what I was intending to do. And if you kill me, you'll lose your only clue to her. So that doesn't make much sense either. Because why don't you come on my boat and we'll make a move? And if we get to where we get to later and you want to kill me, that's fine. If you want to fight me in the boat, that'll be fine too. We'll deal with that as we may. But I've been sitting here to get you. I love this bit. Because it's kind of like you see in mob movies sometimes. You know, like the mob's vicious and they're ripping people off and they're criminals, but they go, no family, right? And so it separates them from these horrible gangsters who just murder randomly. If you have some sort of moral inner standard. So the fact that he will let a guy on his boat who's wanting to kill him and then even agrees, like, bro, you can give it a go. I'm not going to be a coward about it. It says something about his character. You have this inner honor about you. Even though you're the one who kidnapped this person, this maiden, you're a kidnapper. Even with that, I don't see you as just this low scum. Elevates these characters. Ends up his name's Puny Fox. He's one of 7, the smallest of the 7. Again, none of this concerns our boy. Our boy very heroic. And I'll start here because it carries. His every action, I get this weird sense like, okay, so Lord of the Rings happens in this time. And then all the crap blows up. They seal off Middle-earth. Yaddy, yaddy, yaddy. Tolkien's idea was that it's mythology that leads to England, right? So if you take that thread and you stretch, out through the ages, somewhere past, of course, Aragorn, his line continues in this make-believe canon I'm making up, right? I can feel this guy being in that line with how he acts. With he's ready to fight, but he's not bloodthirsty. He won't back down. He won't he's not going to stab you in the back. That's dishonorable. He has honor. All the traits that you get from reading about Aragorn. You start to almost like you smell them. Like he's made of the same stuff. It's there if you read it, people. I know I sound a little crazy maybe, but it's there. He has a dream. Wait. He gets in the boat and he's like, I'll row because I'm not good at driving. So it's like, again, that's the kidnapper who kidnapped your lady. Now you're in his boat. Doesn't just stab him. He's already, no, we're going to see this through. I'm no good at steering, so I might as well row. That physical work isn't like this deterrent to you. Again, there's this level of regalness, of kingliness in these kind of interactions and how you're dealing even with this kidnapper who kidnaps women, right? So it's subtle, but it is there. And once you see it, you'll read other books and you'll start to notice when they sort of have an error. Not that everyone needs to be king-like, but when you say a character such and such, and you see a less good author lose track of what his standard is, you'll start to notice it more and more. That's why I recommend this book so highly. It's done well. It's done well. They get across, he says, because he gets to the Isle of Ransom. That's what they call it. Reminds me of the Isle of Man for some reason. I think there's the Isle of Wight, the Isle of Man. These are real islands. Then the Isle of Ransom. It's not real, it's fake. But it rings, right? It rings in my ear a certain way. He says, don't ask me any more questions because I'll just have to lie to you because I can't tell you anymore. But if I gave an answer, it'd be a lie. And then he tells him to be content that you passed over the sea safe. and a more perilous sea it is forsooth than you deemest. Right? So it's in passing, but I'm like, why is this guy telling him this sea is more dangerous than he thinks it is? When his people have boats and have been on the ocean before. See? This mysterious, along with the midsummer eve, or whatever I said. Marriage, right? There's some mysteriousness. There's this element. But then I also think, because Tolkien has a lot of mythology around the sea, that over the sea is where the elves stay, right? That's where the Undying Land is. It's where all the elves end up going. And one man who was half elf, was it Ariandel, the Mariner? I'm just saying. The way Tolkien likes to do is he has this sort of these, because history does this. It's sort of the same concepts over and over and replayed in different ways. So Napoleon would be like Caesar, would be like Alexander the Great. All conquerors. Conquered this way, conquered that way, ended this way, ended, etc. That's real history, right? So if you wanted to make a fantasy history, you'd have to mimic that cycle. He adds to this cycle a slow degradation. So everything was best with the Valar, then a little less best with the elves, then a little less best with the elves who never went, then a little less, etc. Right? It's just this degradation. It's a Tolkien thing. In his dream, he sees his lady, the hostage, and she's like, what does she say? She says, I'm not going to sit here. I'm not going to deal with these captors and what they're going to do to me. I'll take fate in my own hands. And I'm going to, sort of run out to the sea, and whatever happens out there will happen. Even if that's bad, at least it'll be, something I made happen instead of it happening to me. And then she says, let the hoary one of the sea take me and look to my matters. Now he capitalizes hoary one. And this is just like Poseidon, right? Old man of the sea. But Tolkien has his own sort of god of the sea. Olmo was very vested in the things that happen to men. Again, it's just this constant bell off in the distance in the fog, ringing that I hear. Because it's never mentioned again in this book. Again, it's a short book, who the hoary one is. But she does mention that, she'll leave her fate up to the gods. Now again, this author didn't think of Tolkien when he was writing this. It's Tolkien, I think, carrying this in his head. Unspoken. No, you're not going to find proof of this. Yes, I'm making it up. Yes, the verbiage is there if you read it. I think. I really do think. She says, you can find me in the glittering plain. Same thing those guys said, right? So we get this mysterious, it's adding. What's going on? How's this going to end? He wakes up, the puny fox is gone. He's mad, but then he goes down into town. No one talks to him. It's weird. No one talks to him, but he walks around inside of an old house and finds a very old man. They call him Long Hoary. Just this sort of rickety old guy. They have great conversations, but at some point he asks him to wish me health. He goes, I'll wish you luck in finding what you want, and you wish me health and youth. And he does it in like a playful way. And the guy's like, no, take another drink and wish me health without all the extra. He makes like a point of this. He's making a big point of this person wishing him health. And that's another big thing, a big element in Tolkien is, I forget, one of the guys makes an oath. I'm going to take the paths of the dead, right? And I think Aragorn and Gimli and company find his dead body when they're taking the paths of the dead. It's a little nougat in it. But it speaks to the setup Tolkien has, where verbiage matters, right? And it reminded me when he specifically asked this part, like, make me, you know, drink to my youth. Say, you wish youth for me. It was an odd thing. And again, even without the Tolkien element, it's just a good little addition to this mystery. He says, he goes, is my lady here? He's like, no. You're free to go. We're not going to inhibit you in any way. Where would you like to go? He says, I'll take a boat. I'll go to the glittering plain. The old guy says, we have a boat that goes there tomorrow. And then he's like, it's good that you asked for that and not anything else, because anything else you wouldn't have gotten. What does he say? As easy as it is for thee to go thither whereas we are going, just so hard had it been for thee to go elsewhere. Right? So, as simple as you got here and we're heading to the glittering plain, the reverse would have been for you to try to go anywhere else. It's this outside presence propelling him towards something, right? And again, the gods move you in a way. Olmo from Tolkien sort of directed Faramir to the Council of Elrond, right? Boromir ended up going. Poor Boromir. And he says that the old guy's like, I'll go with you. And we'll be companions, because the other mariners won't really talk to you. It's just going to be us and those running the boat, and they just run the boat. And when they get there, this is what happens. Without talking to him in any way, without any kind of interactions, they carry the old man in a litter. They get him on the boat, and the Hallblythe gets on with them, and the boat just goes on its own. These guys are just steering. But again, if you know your sort of Tolkien lore, you know of some cats who just drive a bunch of boats. Was it Círdan, the shipwright, whose people back in the day, old what's his name? Fëanor. Fëanor stabbed his people, the shipwrights. They just love the sea. And Círdan especially says, I'm gonna stay till the last elf leaves, so to speak. But it's, again, they act, if you read it, they act like that. You start to get impatient for something, and they deliver it right as you're getting impatient, because elves have perfect timing, because they're elves. It doesn't say they're elves, but you feel it. This boat takes them. It's taking them straight to the glittering plain. Him and this old guy, who now calls himself the grandfather. And he tells them about how he knows about the glittering plain. He says they have a deal with their lord, the Undying King, to bring Hallblythe to this island. Specifically him. And that they get to go, and that when he goes, the one behind him, of a certain line, what did he say? The Sea Eagle. House of the Sea Eagle. His group get the chance. Only his group. And then within that, it's the oldest. The battle already, his battles behind him, his strength, his everything. His life's been led. He gets the chance once a year. The oldest one gets to go. And that's if he chooses. Some of them choose not to. Some of them would rather, they say, go end up where more of their people are. Again, you get the sense of an afterlife. And there's a lot of conversations about afterlife in Tolkien as well. Specifically, elves dying and going to the halls of, was it Mandos? I don't remember the name. And then the dwarves think they get reborn, and that men get the special gift, etc. Etc. But that you have a, what is it? The elves do this because it's why they're raising Aragorn. Because we go way back to men helping in some of the battles the elves had, and they made promises, and they kept those promises all the way down to, the sinking of Numenor, etc., etc. So that the fact that the undying king would make a specific promise with these people, I mean, this holds water. This holds weight for me. They he asks the Hallblights to describe to him the island as they approach. He does this. It's cool. It's called descriptions. They get there. The mariners help the old man into the boat and onto the shore. They do not help our boy, our Hallblight. He goes down on his own, not helped, not hindered. It makes a point to say this in multiple different spots. Not helped, not hindered. And I'm like, one, it's a kingly thing always with this reigning kingship idea. Because if you help a king, he owes you. If you hinder him or hurt him, he owes you too. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. But if you're, neutral, then he can be neutral with you. You'll see this in a bunch of other types of stories. Even in real life, when various kings of Europe are talking to each other, they make sure not to sort of insult or be too concrete about what help they'll give, because once they've given their word, they can't go back on it, etc., etc. Right? But it also made me think of, again, Lord of the Rings, because this is some of the end result of the book, right? The Lord of the Rings is the end result of sort of elvish interference in the affairs of men, which is from the Valar interference in the affairs of elves. Right? The Valar thought we could make it perfect for the elves. Then the elves got their dumb ideas with Feanor. They go start holy wars. Then they get involved with men, and they think the same. This Tolkien's tier system. So then the elves go, I can help men be better. And it doesn't work out because Numenor gets sunk. But again, we now add that concept to our timeline, and we're here now. And now we have elves who've learned the lesson that you can't really interfere with men. They're their own creation. They have their own agency. So if he asks for help, you can give it. And he asks to be left alone, you leave him alone. And so they say a lot of times, not helping, not hurting. You do you. Right? So I can feel that tear. Again, that's that bell ringing. I swear you'll read it too. They're off now in a pretty land. The old guy gets led off into the woods, comes back young. Young and healthy again. And there's beautiful maidens everywhere, right? That's the first thing Hallblythe sees is beautiful maidens. And he kneels down to check on the old guy, even though there's these pretty ladies around. Again, regalness check. You can't be distracted by ladies. You want to be the king. Sorry. There are rules. He goes off, comes back. He's young again, macking on all the ladies. He's about it. He's like, look, everything's great here. All the ladies are pretty, prettier than all the other ladies. So he picks one, and it's like, this will be my wife. She's happy to have him. And he's like, Hallblythe, bro, pick one. Let's be happy. And Hallblythe's like, nah, only want my lady. And again, kingly to turn down wondrous gifts. But then Hallblythe gives him the old, what is it we hear a lot in, you hear it in sci-fi, fantasy, all these kind of, what is it to be human? What is this? You'll see some Star Trek episodes, like, why would you want to struggle when you could live in peace? And Captain Kirk's like, you don't understand what it is to be human. It is the struggle, right? This kind of thing. He gives them the old speech, right? You're not going to miss the spray of the ocean, the foreign shores, the glittering oars, the chance for glory, the chance to overcome. You're not going to miss any of this. This boy don't care no more. He's in the land of beautiful maidens. He's young again. He says, I've done all that. He don't care no more. But it's a cool little moment. And he later on, he tells them, like, sort of, at some point you'll regret it. You'll probably regret it. And he says, I think at some point you'll regret it, but you won't remember what it is you regret. And that'll eat you up. But you can't hear me now because you're not going to listen. So there's no point talking about it. Again, there's this ominousness to whatever he says. He doesn't overly share. And then that gives me vibes of Lord of the Rings. It's, what is it? Bilbo's little poem, All That Glitters Isn't Gold, right? Poems aren't just poems in Tolkien's books. They could be prophetic. No man may kill me, Glorfindel says, no man will kill him, and then here come a lady. There's a weight to words in that mythology. And I'm like, I can see you as Tolkien tying it. Again, thin invisible strings, but it's tied. They meet the king, the undying king, which they don't use the word, they don't use dying there at all. They just call him king. And they say his face shines like a star. And I feel like other people have been described as this. Being so pretty that their faces shine. I'm like, that's an elf, bro. You just described an elf. You could describe long, dark hair. Pretty. Everybody's pretty. I'm like, you're dealing with a bunch of elves. He didn't mention the ears, but they're there. He says, can you, ask and you'll receive. And he says, I want my lady. Is she here? The king tells him, one you should love is here and I'll lead you to him. He thinks it's his lady. It's a long trip. He gets tired, all this. But he ends up, this other little note from the king after the trip. The maiden with him says, you go this way, you'll stop at this spot, and you'll see the one you should love, and you'll know her because she's reading a book. So he goes over there. It's a nice dale. That's what they say. A little nook of a spot. All the ladies are pretty. And then one prettier than the others, which is like, he sort of says that he knew that's the one that they were mentioning. And that, like his lady, she's beautiful. But it's not his lady. And he knows this. So he's already kind of knowing this isn't going to go well. He's a little bit sad. But he's watching her. Then she calls for a book. And in the book, there are pages of flaming mountains, castles of war, ships upon the sea. And I'm like, I swear, it's describing crap from Lord of the Rings. The war of the gods, where mountains were made and everything's, that was a terrible. I can see mountains of flaming mountains. Mount Doom is flaming itself. Castles of war. It's Minas Tirith, bro. Ships on the sea. The Númenóreans were literally the sea kings. I'm like, bro. Also in it, he sees himself and his lady. Now this part, again, is weird. Like, how do they know what they look like? But again, if you're an elf, how many generations of men will you live through? Countless. And if you see any generations of family trees, you'll see someone way back in the Civil War. They're like, look, that looks exactly like my uncle. And you put the pair together and they look exactly the same. Right? You'd think they time travel. There are these cycles in the family tree. So if at some point, again, headcanon here, if at some point someone in this lineage of Aragorn promised a son to the daughter, she's an elf, so she's just going to live until it happens. But the human side is going to go through these ups and downs throughout the ages. And that's him, because he's part of the lineage. He's going to look like one of these in the family tree. So they bring him, see if he'll accept. They're not going to force it. It's not him. She has to keep waiting. It's like a whole love story behind a closed door now, because we're closing that door, because he's not going to pick her. He wants his lady. And I'm like, that's the elf, and who turns out to be the daughter of the king. The elf princess is for someone else later on down the line. She got to wait longer. And he's sad because it's not his lady, but now he's all downtrodden because he thinks they're trying to trick him. He don't know what's happened. But I swear if you read it, I think you'll see the same things I see. It's a feeling. It's a feeling in how it's written. They're elves. You're not going to convince me otherwise, though. It never says elf. They're elves. So he goes back to the king. There's a part where he does this a couple of times where he says he felt that the king's face changes, though he still smiled on him. And again, he felt his heart grow cold. He's able to describe, what do we say? When Galadriel says, too great and terrible to behold, or something to this effect? How can you be glorious, beautiful, and terrifying at the same time? How do you describe that? He describes it in a few spots here, where the king is mad at him. Obviously, you rejected my daughter. But he says, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to hinder you. You're free to do what you want. You're free to look anywhere you want here. I'm not doing anything. But he's mad at him. But he's not letting the anger in his face, but it exudes out of like his presence. Because if you have the presence that can shine and be pretty, I think you have the presence to then put this negative, right? This what it says, it chills him to the bone marrow, I think is a verbiage he uses. It's so great. And he does it again in another book. I'll get to it at another time, though. He wanders around, and by this time they start calling him the spearman because he has his armor on. He's the only one with armor because you're in a peaceful land. There's no one here at war. They say at one point, if an army did come, they'd instantly just want to live there because it's so peaceful. But that even if they didn't want to live there, the person talking is pretty sure the king could just wipe them out. Elves have powers. Glorfindel has some powers. Look it up, bro. In any case, when they said it at this part, it reminded me of, what's his name? Tuor? I think that's his name. I think he's the dad of Ariandel. Because he ends up being given like a set of armor, talking to Ulmo, and then going to Gondolin, I believe. It got me that vibe. It gave me that vibe of this guy in armor when no one else needs armor really for that matter. And the way it was sort of presented to him. I got the vibe. At some point, he asks his friends, he's like, look, I got to leave. He's like, I'm cleared to leave. I'm leaving. And his boy, who they call now, what do they call him? Sea Eagle. I love when name changes happen for an appropriate reason. He's no longer the grandfather. He calls himself the Sea Eagle, but he's young now. Why would I keep calling myself the grandfather? That makes sense. But that a name change is earned through some change, right? I believe the guy who conquered Japan did the same thing. At every level of increase he had, he would give himself a name change to signify that growth in his sort of status. They meet the warden of the uttermost house. That's what they said, the warden of the uttermost house, capitalized. And I instantly thought of the last homely house, which is in Rivendell. It's Elrod's house. And I'm like, come on, bro. They're free to eat. They're free to stay. They get up to leave. And the warden's like, you're going the wrong way. And they're like, no, we're not. We're going, I'm going to go to the edge and send my boy off. But I'm going to come back. And the warden's like, I'm here to warn you. If you head towards those mountains, you don't get to come back unless you bring someone. Because pilgrims can make their way through the mountains. Rarely. Because on the other side of the mountains is the, what do they call it? The Desert of Desolation? Desert of Dread. That's a nasty one. Desert of Dread. Now, in his defense, he was going to go with him. He's like, I said, I'll go with you. But the maiden starts freaking out, like, we can't take a step that way. And, of course, your boy Hobblythe, being regal as he is, without being a king, it's just in his bones, says, no, this is where we part. You can go back. We did it. He starts walking towards the mountains, gets sort of like loopy, falls out, wakes up. All the food's gone, and he's sort of like drained. And I'm like, if that don't make you think of, what was it, Doriath? There was a spell over Doriath where you'd get lost trying to get in unless they allowed you in. You just couldn't make it. Even the orcs would just get lost in the woods and turned around, and they could never get in. Even Sauron, Morgoth couldn't get in. Too strong a spell. I'm like, if that don't make you think, I'm like, bro, it's elves, bro. It's elves. Okay. So now he's out in the waste with no food because all the food in the wallet, which it's a fun little side note. Thinking of a wallet full of meats. I don't know why a leather wallet full of meats just tickles my fancy, but it's kind of cool. Again, it makes it feel very ancient. He's saved in the waste by 3 travelers. Turns out to be our 3 travelers from the very beginning of the book. They're still asking him, is this the land? Is this the way? Like, I know the way. He goes, y'all go that way, but I'm going back. I got to find my lady. And they're like, look, we just barely made it. The city is over a month away. There's nothing to eat between here and there. You're going to die. You might as well kill yourself. There's no way through that away. He goes, if it's longer than a couple of days your way, we might die. But there ain't no way back that away. And so he's like, okay, his only hope is to go back. So he then leads those 3 men to the uttermost house. The guy meets him, treats him the same as before. Like all the elves treat him the same way. Like he doesn't, not that he doesn't exist. What does it say at some point? That they loved him as if he had been a rare image which had been brought to the land for its adornment. Right? They just treat him like this. It's a thing to look at. To make it better. Everything's there to make everything better for them, of course, because they're elves. They're soft. Okay, I said it. Elves be a little bit soft. So they don't, not negative or positive towards them. Just let them be. And so he's back now in the glittering land. Those guys get young and they're happy. But he's like, this isn't what I need. I think he looks at the glittering land and says, I've seen a lot of pretty places. Again, kingly. To look at all that there is and to not be overawed by it. You see it for what it is. Grass here is the same as grass in my Cleveland. I like my Cleveland. Not to be, you're not going to be tricked. So then he decides, I'm going to build myself a boat. They give him lumber, various types of lumber. And he builds himself a boat, sails out of there. Again, reminds me of Lord of the Rings. The sea is how everything ends up. If you're allowed through, you could take a boat and go right to the Undying Lands now, which is what they're called. King of the Undying. I'm like, it really is right there, though. It really is right there. In any case, he makes a boat, gets back to the Isle of Ransom. He re-meets the puny fox, who comes clean. And now we have this it's an interesting what is it? A step down. Because now his interactions, he's still mad at the puny fox. Like, you kidnapped my lady. And he's like, I had to because of the Undying King. Which now, him having met the king, he understands, like, you're kind of going to do what he says. He comes to an understanding with the puny fox, who agrees to serve him. Then he comes to an understanding with the people, with the sea eagle people. They do sort of a mock festival. Then the sea people like to make it up to him because we don't want any kind of interference. And it's a weird, it's not, I've seen some stories where we're already at peace, but we use the same rules we'd use for if we were at war, right? Where, all right, well, you get to choose whatever you want of my treasure because you're a friend. And then because I'm a friend, I only take this one gold cup. And then we all hail your magnanimity, etc., etc., right? So it's the same as if we had been at war because there was this negative between us. Hallblythe having been a victim of their kidnapping, them having to have kidnapped her because of the oaths they've had with the Undying King. And now they're sort of making peace between the two of them with this new understanding. They present him with a bunch of maidens who are happy. They haven't been tortured or anything. And they're happy to go with him. And he's like, I'll take them. And if they find any husbands suitable, they'll have them. And if they want to come back here, I'll send them back here with, husbands that'll guard them or guards that will safeguard them forever. You're not going to do them dirty. So it's now a positive for all the ladies. Then they present his hostage. He's very happy to see her. And he sort of tells her now we're friends with these people. And she's like, good. If you say it, I believe it kind of situation. Then they head back to Cleveland. It says here that at the end, the puny fox forgot all lore which he had learned of the ancient men, living and dead, and became as other men and was no wizard. I'm like, bro, you're talking about a wizard too? And you want me not to think about Lord of the Rings? It says him and the puny fox then had many adventures that aren't in this tale. And that's sort of how it ends. It's a very short book. It's very dense. Rich. I say rich, not dense. Rich. Again, I think of this whole through line of Tolkien-esque stuff to it. You don't have to think that. You can just read a short story and have fun. But I kind of challenge anyone, if you actually read it and you read a lot of Tolkien, to tell me you don't get that sense. Because I really, really do get that sense. And again, other of his works have different, but I'll cover those when I get to them. All right, I've been blabbing a lot. I hope this mic recorded well. I'm going to do my ad. It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful writing, people. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy it. And like I said, it's free. I really don't know if you can argue it. You could probably read it. If you read fast, you'll get it done. You could get it done real quick. Won't it? And, some short stories I feel like cut off too much. This one really feels like it is a piece of a larger thing. And I'd be happy to read more of it. He didn't write more of it, sadly. But I'd like more. All right, people. I'll talk to you all next week.